chosen one. You may think God is taking people away from you, but what if the deeper removal is happening somewhere else? What if the real thing losing access to you is the version of yourself that had to perform, explain, shrink, and stay understandable just to feel safe? There is a reason the story of Enoch feels so different. His life was not defined by how loudly he announced himself. He walked with God. And over time, that walk became more important than the world that once knew where to place him. Do not turn that into a prediction that you are about to disappear. That would miss the deeper pattern. The question is, what happens when the old ways of locating you stop working? When a friend who knew the compliant version of you cannot find that version anymore? When a room that once felt normal suddenly feels too small? Maybe you have felt this recently. You type a message, then erase it. You open a group chat, then close it, without saying anything. You sit in a familiar place and feel strangely absent from the life that used to fit you. Yet something inside knows you cannot keep returning to the same shape. This can feel like rejection. But before you decide what this season means, notice what it is exposing. You are being shown how much of your identity was built through reflection. Other people approved, needed, praised, or misunderstood you, and those reactions slowly became mirrors. Now some of those mirrors are going dark. That is frightening when you have spent years checking your face in them. You may not miss the relationship as much as you miss the version of yourself that existed inside it. You may miss knowing exactly who you were there. Here is the question I want you to hold. Who remains when the mirrors disappear? Not who gets revenge, not who proves everyone wrong. Who are you when there is nobody left to confirm the old name you carried? Silence does not always create peace. Sometimes the people become quieter and your mind becomes louder. You replay conversations. You wonder if you made a mistake. You ask for clarity, then question that clarity as soon as it arrives. That contradiction matters. Isolation by itself proves nothing. Silence by itself proves nothing. Losing people does not automatically mean you are chosen or spiritually advanced. But when reduction makes you more honest, grounded, responsible, and less controlled by approval, something meaningful may be happening. This is where Enoch speaks in a deeper way. His identity was not built around public recognition. His defining movement was relational. He walked. He stayed close. He became a person whose center was no longer controlled by the crowd. Before this ends, you will understand the difference between rejection and what I call sacred reduction. You will see the hidden danger inside isolation. Later, you will see why a quiet environment can still leave a noisy receiver inside you. For now, do one thing. Do not chase the mirror that just went dark. Let the silence show you what you asked that mirror to give you. Approval, permission, belonging, proof. Then ask whether God may be teaching you to carry that identity with less negotiation. I release the old mirror. Removal is not the revelation. What becomes clear after the noise is gone is the revelation. And first, you must understand why life can get smaller before it becomes more true. Sacred reduction begins when less does not automatically mean worse. A smaller circle can expose a stronger center. A quieter schedule can reveal what truly matters. A closed door can show whether you were walking by conviction or simply following the momentum around you. But this needs discernment. Not every loss is divine removal. Not every lonely season is sacred. This message will not make every disappointment sound spiritual. The first sign is not who left. The first sign is what their leaving produces in you. Does the silence make you more honest? Does it make you more responsible? Does it deepen your walk with God? Or does it make you bitter and obsessed with proving that everyone else was wrong? Sacred reduction does not inflate your ego. It removes what your ego was leaning on. It asks whether you can remain truthful without needing them to become villains. You may recognize the symptom. A friendship fades, and your first thought is that you failed. A room stops welcoming you, and you assume you became unworthy. A plan collapses, and your mind starts searching for the flaw in you. You call it rejection, because rejection is the explanation you already know. But rejection is not the only explanation. Sometimes an identity changes before the environment catches up. The person who always said yes starts saying no. The person who kept peace at any cost starts telling the truth. That change creates friction. People may call you distant. They may say you are different. Sometimes they will be right. You are different. The important question is whether that difference is producing greater integrity or only greater isolation. This is why I call it sacred reduction. It is not a reward for being special. It is a process of removing excess noise so that what is true becomes easier to recognize. The value is not in having less. The value is in seeing more clearly, because less is controlling you. Ask yourself 3 questions. Am I becoming clearer or more bitter? Am I becoming more peaceful or simply more avoidant? Is this boundary coming from conviction or from an untreated wound? These questions protect you from turning pain into a spiritual costume. Enoch matters here because the center of his story was a walk, not a crowd, not a public argument. A walk with God became the defining line. You do not need to force the same ending onto your own story, but you can learn from the pattern. When the center becomes stronger, some attachments lose their authority. When alignment becomes more important, some old arrangements stop feeling natural. There is grief in that. A healthy boundary can still make you miss someone. Spiritual maturity does not mean becoming numb to the cost of change. The difference is that grief no longer gets to decide your direction. You can miss what was and still refuse to return to what no longer. Clarity before company. Hold that line. If sacred reduction can remove external noise, why does the inside of you sometimes become even louder? Why do you still rehearse explanations after the conversation has ended? Why does the need to be understood survive even after the relationship changes? That is where the next layer begins. The hardest mirror to release is not always another person. Sometimes it is the identity you learned to perform whenever that person was watching. The identity you perform can survive long after the audience is gone. That is why some people leave your life and still keep speaking inside your mind. You imagine what they would think. You hear the old criticism before you make a decision. You explain yourself to people who are not even in the room. This is identity withdrawal. The external relationship changes first. The internal dependency takes longer. You may stop sending the message, but your mind keeps writing it. Chosen one. Freedom does not mean never caring again. It means the old reaction is no longer the final authority. You can feel the pull to explain yourself and still choose silence. You can fear disappointing someone and still choose what is true. Maybe your old identity had a name. The good one, the fixer, the rescuer, the easy one, the person who kept everyone calm while carrying chaos inside. Those roles may have protected you once, but protection can become a prison. Notice what happens in your body when one of those names is challenged. Your jaw tightens, your shoulders lift, your stomach contracts, your breathing becomes shallow. Take one quiet moment now. Notice your jaw, notice your shoulders, notice your chest. Do not force anything to change. Bring to mind the role you are most tired of performing. Then notice where your body holds the pressure to keep performing it. You do not need to fight that pressure, you need to see it. A quiet season can be useful because it removes enough external movement for hidden patterns to become visible. But there is a trap here. You can leave the old room physically and carry every voice from that room inside your head. You can set the boundary and still spend hours imagining whether they approve of it. Silence alone is not transformation. A changed environment creates space, but it does not automatically create a changed inner pattern. At some point, you have to stop asking the old audience to certify the new person you are becoming. Enoch was remembered for a walk. Moses also moved through a wilderness where familiar structures could no longer tell him who he was. Different stories, different purposes. Both show what happens when external confirmation loses control. And this is where a deeper question begins. What if the noise you are trying to escape is no longer mainly outside you? What if part of the exhaustion comes from carrying too many unfinished reactions inside your attention? Researchers have explored how the condition of the mind affects clarity, focus, and the way different processes work together. One line of research connects unexpectedly with what we are discussing. I am not going to name the resource yet. I only want you to hold one question while we keep moving. What if some of what you have called spiritual confusion is not a lack of sincerity and not proof that you are failing? What if the receiver itself is carrying more noise than you realize? We will come back to that. For now, return to the simpler work. Stop over explaining yourself. Let one decision stand without a speech attached to it. Let one boundary remain a boundary even if nobody claps for it. I stop over explaining myself. Because the next test is not whether people understand your change. The next test is whether you can keep walking when they do not. That is where the Enoch pattern becomes practical and borrowed identity begins to lose its final grip. The next test is simple, but it is not easy. Can you keep walking when the old audience stops confirming the person you are becoming? Can you make one clear choice without building a defense around it? Can you let the truth of a decision stand before anyone else agrees with it? This is what I call the Enoch pattern. It is not about disappearing from the world. It is about becoming less dependent on the world to tell you who you are. The deeper your walk becomes, the less every reaction around you gets to rename you. Think about the last boundary you set. Maybe you said no. Maybe you stopped answering immediately. Maybe you chose rest instead of rescuing everyone again. The action was small, but the discomfort was not. Part of you still wanted permission from the people affected by your change. That is where borrowed identity reveals itself. You know the decision is right, but you still wait for somebody else to make it feel safe. You know the old pattern is exhausting, but you still look back to see whether anyone is upset that you left it. So test the pattern honestly. If nobody applauds, will you still do what is right? If nobody understands today, does your conviction disappear? If the other person never changes, will you still keep the boundary that protects what is true? Those questions are not dramatic. That is why they matter. Spiritual maturity is often revealed in ordinary decisions that nobody celebrates. The Enoch pattern begins when your walk becomes more important than your witness. You stop living for the moment when everyone finally admits you were right. You stop waiting for a public reversal. You stop treating vindication as proof that your path was valid. And there is another layer I want you to hold. Earlier, I asked whether some of your confusion might come from the condition of the receiver itself. I have not forgotten that question. We are going to return to it soon. There is a line of research described in the material I will mention later that focuses on how the brain works when different processes operate together. The claim is not that science replaces faith. The point is that clarity has a physical side as well as a spiritual one. For now, notice the connection. You can have a sincere heart and still be mentally overloaded. You can know a boundary is right and still replay it 50 times. You can feel called towards something and still struggle to organize your attention around the next step. That does not automatically mean you are failing. It means the human receiver matters. Hold this question. What if part of the fog you keep blaming on your character has a condition that can be supported? What if you do not need more shame, but a clearer way to receive what you already know? We will come back to that answer. First, there is one danger we have to remove from the path. Because isolation can look holy while quietly feeding the very ego you are trying to outgrow. If your solitude is real, it should make you more honest. It should make you more responsible. It should make you less interested in proving that everyone else is wrong. isolation is not proof that you are chosen. That sentence may disappoint the part of you that wants every painful experience to carry a special title, but it can also protect you from turning a wound into an identity. Sometimes people pull away because you are growing. Sometimes they pull away because communication broke down. Sometimes you leave because a boundary is necessary. And sometimes you leave because being alone feels safer than risking another honest relationship. The outside can look identical. The inside is different. A wounded person can say, "Nobody understands me." A grounded person can say, "Not everyone will understand me, and I still have a responsibility to stay truthful and open-hearted." This is the hidden danger. Inside a removal season, pain can imitate clarity, pride can imitate boundaries, avoidance can imitate peace. And if you call every withdrawal sacred, you may protect the very pattern that needs healing. So look at the fruit. Are you becoming easier to offend? Are you secretly enjoying the idea that everyone will regret losing you? Are you collecting signs that prove you are above the people around you? If so, the silence may be feeding a wound instead of forming wisdom. Sacred solitude makes you clearer. Wounded isolation makes everyone else the enemy. There is no shame in admitting loneliness. You do not need to decorate it with spiritual language. You can miss people. You can need support. That honesty is strength. It keeps the Enoch pattern from becoming a fantasy about superiority. The story of Enoch points toward a walk with God, not contempt for everyone who walks differently. Ask yourself what your solitude is producing: greater patience, better decisions, more responsibility, a softer heart with stronger boundaries. But if the result is suspicion, obsession, bitterness, or a constant need to interpret every small event as proof that others are against you, stop and tell the truth. Pain deserves care. It does not need a crown. I choose truth over fantasy. Now I want to return to the question I asked you to hold. Earlier, I told you there was another side of clarity, one connected to the condition of the receiver. I waited because a solution means very little before you understand the shape of the problem. You understand it now. The outside can become quiet while the inside remains crowded. A relationship can end while its voice keeps running in your mind. A boundary can be correct while your attention is still trapped in replay, doubt, and mental fog. So here is the missing piece. Why can you understand all of this and still struggle to move? Why can insight remain insight instead of becoming action? The answer is not that you need to become more chosen. It is not that you need another dramatic sign. Part of the answer may be much more practical. Your mind needs conditions that support clarity. That is where we are going next. We are going to name the receiver gap, close the loop we opened earlier, and look at one optional tool described in the product materials for people who want additional support. But remember this before we cross that bridge. No tool can make you chosen. No tool can replace God. No tool can obey for you. The purpose of a tool is support, not spiritual status. Here is the receiver gap. You can know what matters and still struggle to act on it. You can finish a prayer with conviction, then spend the next hour second-guessing the decision you already understood. You read the same paragraph 3 times. You enter a room and forget why. You postpone one important task while finishing 10 easy ones. Then you call yourself lazy, undisciplined, or spiritually weak. That explanation is too simple. Insight and execution are not the same thing. External quiet creates space, but the mind still needs conditions that support attention, decisions, and follow through. So do not add shame to fog. Reduce unnecessary inputs. Protect your rest. Give important decisions one task at a time. Create moments where your mind does not have to compete with 5 other demands. This is receiver restoration. It does not promise a perfect mind. It creates better conditions for clarity. Sacred reduction removes noise, so truth becomes easier to recognize. The Enoch test stops you from outsourcing identity. Receiver restoration protects the mind that must carry your decisions. The noise outside you can disappear, while the noise inside remains. Removal creates space. Clarity determines what you do with it. Now, I can close the research loop from earlier. The product materials connect their approach to Dr. Roger Sperry, whose split-brain research received the Nobel Prize in 1981. They use that history to explain cooperation between the two hemispheres of the brain. Those materials also share customer stories. A woman from California described feeling as if a block channel had cleared after using the approach. A man from Texas described improved mental clarity and decision-making. Those are customer experiences, not guarantees. Your result may be different. A team led by Doctor Daniel Barone in New York developed an 8-minute targeted auditory sequence. The product materials call the approach neural sync technology and describe its goal as supporting what they call whole brain activation. They call it the genius switch. The sequence is designed for once daily use with headphones and closed eyes. The materials do not present it as a replacement for prayer, obedience, boundaries, rest, or spiritual practice. It is positioned as an optional tool for people who want additional support for mental clarity. This is not for someone looking for a shortcut to become chosen. It is for the person who is tired of treating every moment of fog as a character flaw, and who wants to support the receiver while continuing the deeper work. The product page currently lists $49, with an offer of $39 on that page. It also lists 4 bonuses: a guided visualization, a grocery shopping guide, a classic manifestation book, and a 5 habits infographic. The materials describe lifetime access and a money-back guarantee. They also compare the offer with more expensive neurofeedback options. Those comparisons come from the marketing materials of the seller and should be understood that way. The seller says the current $39 price may increase. I cannot promise that it will remain available. If this resonates, the official resource is linked in the description and pinned comment. Read the details before deciding. The product materials also warn that tracks with similar names may appear elsewhere. They state that the verified version is distributed through the official site rather than common audio platforms. Keep the order clear. A tool is not the calling. A clearer receiver does not choose your values for you. It does not set the boundary. It does not walk the road. That part still belongs to you. And next we return to the deeper question. What does life feel like when clarity stops being something you chase and becomes something you protect? A tool can support clarity. It cannot replace God. It cannot replace obedience. It cannot make the hard decision for you. It cannot become the person you were called to become. That is why we return to the deeper current now. The real work is not owning a resource. The real work is learning how to protect clarity once you recognize it. A clear moment means very little if you immediately hand your attention back to everything that made you confused. Imagine tomorrow morning, your phone is still beside you, but you do not reach for it first. You sit for a moment. The room is quiet. You know the one thing that matters today, and you do not need 10 signs before you begin. You pray without bargaining. You listen without forcing an answer. You choose one boundary and keep it. You take one useful action before asking anyone whether it was the right one. That is a different life. Not louder, not more dramatic, clearer. You are not becoming unreachable. You are becoming less available to confusion. This is what sacred reduction was trying to reveal. The point was never to make your world empty. The point was to make truth easier to hear inside it. The Enoch pattern was never about being mysterious. It was about walking without needing the crowd to certify every step. And the receiver gap gave you the practical side. Even when the outside becomes quieter, the inside still needs care. Rest matters. Attention matters. Boundaries matter. What you repeatedly feed your mind matters. For the person who felt something shift when the optional resource was mentioned earlier, that door is still open in the description and pinned comment. Read the details slowly. Decide from clarity, not pressure. Then return here. Because the resource is not the destination. Picture 6 months from now. Your circle may be smaller, but the conversations are cleaner. Your work may still require effort, but you spend less time fighting yourself before you begin. You make fewer decisions from panic. You no longer call every coincidence a sign. You no longer call every closed door rejection. You no longer call every difficult feeling intuition. You become more careful with language, more honest with yourself, more willing to say, "I do not know yet." And there is one final thing that has to be released before this message closes. It is more subtle than fear. It can survive prayer, boundaries, solitude, and even clarity. It is the need to be seen changing. The need for someone from your past to notice. The need for them to regret losing access to you. The need for your growth to become evidence in the eyes of somebody else. That attachment can follow you into every new season. And if you do not release it, the old mirror is still controlling you from a distance. The final freedom is not that they finally see who you are. The final freedom is that you no longer need their recognition to remain who you are. There is one more layer. Divine guidance can expose a pattern, but you still have to decide whether you will release your attachment to it. No one can surrender your need for recognition on your behalf. You may have stopped explaining yourself out loud, but perhaps part of you is still waiting for the comeback scene. You imagine them watching you succeed. You imagine the apology. You imagine the day they finally understand what they lost. That fantasy feels like healing because it places you in the winning position. But the old audience is still in the room. They are still deciding whether your future feels complete. Real removal goes deeper. It is not about becoming harder for them to reach. It is about becoming harder for their opinion to control. Ask yourself what you still want from the people who misunderstood you. An apology, regret, recognition, proof that you mattered. Do not judge the answer. Just name it. Now notice what happens inside your body. Maybe the chest tightens. Maybe the throat feels heavy. Let the reaction be information instead of a command. Open one hand. Imagine the old role resting there. The fixer, the good one, the rejected one, the misunderstood one, the person who would someday prove everyone wrong. You do not need to hate that version of yourself. That identity helped you survive something. Thank it for getting you this far. Then let your hand soften. Release it. Now, begin the final activation. Sit or stand in a way that lets your breathing feel natural. Do not force a spiritual experience. Simply give your attention somewhere to rest. Imagine an empty room. There are no mirrors on the walls. There is no crowd waiting to approve you. There is one open door in front of you. Notice the strange part. Nobody is standing beyond that door to congratulate you. The door is simply open, and the next honest step belongs to you. See yourself move toward it, not because you have proof, not because someone finally apologized. You move because your direction no longer requires their permission. Place one hand over your chest, if that feels comfortable. Feel one slow breath, enter, and leave. Let your body learn the sentence your mind has been trying to understand. I can move without being witnessed. This is not disappearance. This is freedom from negotiation. Now picture the life that can grow from that freedom. 6 months from now, you spend less time rehearsing old conversations. Your relationships may be fewer, but deeper. Your decisions come from values before panic. Your rest is no longer something you have to earn. You can hear the disappointment of another person without immediately abandoning yourself. You still have difficult days, but confusion does not automatically become identity anymore. That is the person sacred reduction was making room for, not a person above everyone else. A person who can stand among people without surrendering the center every time the room changes. And this is the final test of the Enoch pattern. Can you walk without turning your walk into a performance? Can you become without demanding witnesses? If the answer is becoming yes, even slowly, then something important has changed. The mirror is losing power. What remains is not the version of you that finally wins their approval. What remains is the person who no longer needs approval to keep walking. Now, we can answer the question that has been open from the beginning. Who remains when the mirrors disappear? Not a more impressive version of you, not a colder version, not someone with the perfect speech for everyone who misunderstood you. What remains is a less negotiated identity. Sacred reduction removed some of the noise. The Enoch pattern showed you how to keep walking without demanding constant witnesses. The receiver gap reminded you that clarity also needs practical conditions inside the mind. Together, they point to one movement: reduction, identity, clarity, action. Look back for a moment. Think about the rooms that changed, the conversations that ended, the roles that became too heavy, the people you tried to keep happy while slowly disappearing from yourself. You do not have to call every loss divine. You do not have to pretend every ending was good. Some things hurt because they mattered. But you can still ask what the season revealed. Which mirror had too much power? Which name had become too small? Which fear kept making your decisions for you? Let gratitude enter without forcing it. Be grateful for the clarity you have now. Be grateful for the boundaries you finally learned to name. And release what no longer needs to travel with you. Release the old mirror. Release the old role. Release the explanation you have rehearsed 100 times. Release the fear that being misunderstood means being wrong. Release the need for them to miss you. Release the need for them to regret it. Release the fantasy that your future must become a courtroom where everyone admits your value. Your life is not a closing argument. Chosen one. The story of Enoch does not need to become a prediction about disappearing. Let it become a reminder about walking. A life can grow so centered that old definitions lose their ability to hold it. So let these words become your declaration. I am not abandoned. I am not defined by the room I left. I do not need confusion to feel connected. I do not need applause to know my direction. I walk in clarity. I live from what is true. I release the identity I had to perform. I allow my decisions to come from conviction instead of fear. I can love people without handing them the authority to define me. I can miss what was and still refuse to return to what no longer fits. I can be uncertain without becoming lost. I can protect my mind without turning isolation into superiority. I walk in quiet clarity. And when the old mirror calls again, remember what you learned here. You do not have to break the mirror. You do not have to convince it. You simply stop asking it for your name. The deepest removal was never about becoming invisible to the world. It was about making the false version of you harder to find. The version that survived through approval. The version that kept bargaining with people for permission to become whole. Let that version become difficult to locate. Then keep walking, not loudly, not bitterly, not as proof that you were chosen above anyone else. Walk with humility, walk with responsibility, walk with a clearer mind and a less divided heart. Removal is not the revelation. What becomes clear when the noise is gone is the revelation. And when every old mirror goes dark, may you discover that you were never empty behind them. You were there all along, waiting to live without negotiation. Keep what is true, release what is not, then take the next faithful step. I walk in quiet clarity,